But
Thanks, Jen. On gas, you just said that, less supply raises prices. It's not in our strategic interest to reduce the supply. We also know, the president as recently as yesterday talked about increasing domestic manufacturing to bring down prices on inflated items like goods. So why not apply the same logic to energy and increase domestic production here?
well, there are 9,000 approved oil leases that the oil companies are not tapping into currently. So I would ask them that question.
Is there nothing that the administration can do to get those providers back to pre-pandemic levels?
Do you think the oil companies don't have enough money to drill on the places that have been pre-approved?
Just asking.
I would point that question to them, and we can talk about it more tomorrow when you learn more.
Do you think that opening the Keystone pipeline and having more energy-friendly policies might do that?
The Keystone Pipeline has never been operational. It would take years for that to have any impact. I know a number of members of Congress have suggested that, but that is a proposed solution that has no relationship or would have no impact on what the problem is. We here all agree is an issue.
So during those years where it would, take to bring down prices, as you're saying, we should just continue to buy Russian oil?
Well, again, Jackie, I think you're familiar with a number of steps we've taken, a historic release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. What we can, let me finish. What we can do over time, and what this is all a reminder of in the president's view, is our need to reduce our reliance on oil. The Europeans need to do that. We need to do that. If we do more to invest in clean energy, more to invest in other sources of energy, that's exactly what we can do to prevent this from happening in the future. We welcome any Republicans from joining us in that effort. Go ahead.
As long as we're buying Russian oil, though, aren't we financing the war?
Well, Jackie, again, it's only about 10% of what we're importing. I've not made any announcement about any decision on that front, but our objective here and our focus is making sure that any step we take maximizes the impact on President Putin and minimizes it on the American people. And anyone who's calling for an end to the carve-out should be clear that that would raise prices. Go ahead.
It feels like, because you now have Republicans and Democrats calling on the administration to ban oil from Russia. As you've laid out, there are a range of different options under consideration. What would the administration need to see in order to make a final decision?
Need to see how? Tell me more.
Happening on the ground. What would need to happen in order to prompt a final decision on an oil ban?
I don't know that we look at it exactly through that prism. Obviously, we have not held back in taking significant historic steps that are crippling the Russian economy right now. I think there's no question about that, and the president has led the world in doing exactly that. But what factor we're looking at here is the impact on the gas pump for Americans and reduction of supply in the marketplace. A reduction of global supply would have an impact on raising prices. So that's the prism we look at it through.
There are some interim steps that could be taken instead of a full outright ban that would potentially mitigate the costs on gas prices. Is there a sense that this is at a tipping point and that some of those interim options?
We are continuing, Kristen, to look at other options. We could take right now to cut U.S. consumption of Russian energy, but in the context of maintaining a steady global supply of energy. So that's what we're trying to balance.
Pelosi has come out also in support of banning Russian oil, so why keep the carve out, especially when oil, with the argument that Putin is going to not benefit from oil, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I think I do know what you're trying to say. Well, our objective and the president's objective has been to maximize impact on President Putin and Russia while minimizing impact to us and our allies and partners. And I know you've heard me say this a few times before, but we don't have a strategic interest in reducing the global supply of energy. And that would raise prices at the gas pump for the American people around the world because it would reduce the supply available. And it's as simple as less supply raises prices. And that is certainly a big factor for the president in this at this moment. It also has the potential to pad the pockets of President Putin, which is exactly what we are not trying to do. So as the president has said, we carved out payments for energy, trade, and transport from our financial sectors sanctions with that in mind. I would also note that we have been taking steps to degrade Russia's status as a leading energy supplier over time. That includes, of course, shutting down Nord Stream 2 or preventing Nord Stream 2 from operating. That's why we're surging LNG to Europe to help accelerate its diversification from Russian gas. And I think you've also seen European leaders talk about the need to reduce their reliance and to diversify. And we are continuing to look at other options we could take right now to cut U.S. consumption of Russian energy. I mean, for us, if you look at publicly available data, it's only about 10% of our imports. But again, reducing the supply out there would have an impact on prices and on prices at the gas pump.
I guess the question is, if oil is already so expensive, isn't he already benefiting from from an already costly, price of oil? How does he stand to benefit if you continue to allow that?
If it reduces further, it makes it more expensive. So I think we look at it through that prism. Go ahead.
On the cost of this, I mean, the president has sort of braced American people for this, right? He's said that, defending democracy and liberty is never without a cost. So is it just that banning all Russian oil and gas imports, that's just a cost that he thinks is too much for the American people to bear?
Well, I think there's two different pieces here. Banning banning Russian imports, right? Or what he has done is carved out payments for energy trade and transport from our financial sanctions. They're slightly two different things. And the president, the volatility in the oil markets, as the president has been predicting and as you referenced, he talked about in the speech he gave last week, is a direct result of the fact that President Putin invaded Ukraine, and that has created volatility. One of the big reason, of course, that the president announced the release of of 30 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and the coordinated release is to address that and ensure we are doing what we can to put more in the marketplace. But again, his prism he looks at this through is how can we maximize impact on President Putin while minimizing it on the American people.